Welcome back to the Manager's Mic. I have with us today Nick Reich. He is a leadership coach, author, and the co-founder of Abundant Empowerment and Collab, organizations dedicated to developing people first leaders and high trust teams, which is why I'm excited about this. His upcoming book, Every Player is Bigger Than the Program, blends storytelling, strategy, and systems thinking to help leaders navigate complexity with clarity and humanity. Nick's leadership philosophy was shaped on and off the basketball court. As a young coach, he built a team that had no history, no reputation, and every reason to fail. Yet, together they built a state championship program in just 4 years. It was the fastest to win in Indiana history. That experience informs his work today. The belief that people, when led well, become the engine of transformation. Nick has spent more than 2 decades leading and advising purpose-driven organizations across the social impact and business sectors. He is recognized for his ability to translate complex change into practical, actionable guidance that helps leaders build trust, strengthen culture, and communicate with clarity. He lives in Indianapolis, where he coaches leaders, facilitates retreats, and teaches the People First Playbook to teams committed to creating meaningful, human-centered work. Nick, welcome to the Manager's Mic podcast.
Well, I appreciate you having me on.
So, how was that introduction? What did I miss?
I think you got it there. As you mentioned, a lot of the work that I do stemmed from being a school social worker and launching a high school basketball program at a inner city Indianapolis charter school almost 20 years ago. And, no brand new school, no gymnasium, no team. And as you mentioned, we built the fastest state championship program in Indiana history. And, basketball in Indiana is a big deal. And that was actually the last game I ever coached. And I've been doing this work around leadership and leadership development ever since. It's been a passion of mine to understand, how do you create high-performing teams? How do you create high-performing cultures? And what kind of leaders make that possible? So thanks again for having me on.
Yeah. You mentioned social work, if I heard you correctly. Was there anything that drew you to that, Nick, before? And did you plan being a basketball coach, or was that not on the roadmap, if I may?
It was definitely not on the roadmap. I took the circuitous route to finishing my degree. I started at a small school in Illinois where I was playing college basketball, and I was kicked out of college at the end of my sophomore year. Went down a little bit of a path where I would say it was a lost, early 20s, trying to figure out my way. When I came back to Indianapolis, or settled in Indianapolis, I decided I wanted to go into social work and finish my degree there. And I really wanted to work with youth and mentor and provide something that maybe I didn't have in my life. So that was the plan. And I started doing youth work here in Indianapolis, became the school social worker at this new charter school. I joined halfway through the second year of the school's existence. And this is back again, almost 20 years ago, I think in 2007. We started with a basketball program that was just an after school intramural program. It was, how do we find ways to keep kids busy and productive and give them something to do? It was a very small staff at the school at that time. And they said, hey, you played a little bit of college basketball a long time ago. Why don't you help these kids and start building this program? And that's what we did. So coaching was never the goal. It was always, for me, kind of a means to an end, to keep kids engaged, to provide a pathway for them to, have something productive, but also provide a pathway to graduation and what was beyond for them.
What is it about basketball that you feel, because you have a pretty powerful story, you use the basketball team story, as we mentioned in the intro, when you talk about leadership, but what did basketball teach you about coaching? And what drew you most to it in regards to how we can connect the dots and how it helps most new managers miss certain key things about managing people the right way? And we can frame it through a basketball court. because I feel you're passionate about that, if that's fair.
It's one of those things that when you look back, it's easier to frame when you're
Right.
in it. But what we know is, planting those seeds of the type of culture, the type of teammates, the type of people that we wanted to be, the type of leaders that I wanted to be was really, really important. And that level of consistency is extremely important over time. So when I talk to emerging leaders and new managers now, and that's really what we talk about in the book, is this People First Playbook as a leader, especially as a new leader. I say when you become a manager, when you become a new leader, you become a household name.
Mm.
The folks that report up to you are talking about you at their dinner table, and I believe you have a responsibility to learn and to do that well, and to do some of these things that creates good managers and creates good leaders. And I believe that starts within each individual person. We always say that leader development is self-development.
Right.
So we start talking with new leaders and around building purpose, your individual why, your core values. Understanding those things are really important. And I had to do that as a young coach. What do I believe? What do I stand for? The types of things that I need to put in place. And all of these things translate into new managers and new leaders, because right around the same time, I was managing my first team, late 20s. I had, 4 direct reports right around the same time I was doing this coaching. It really starts with understanding that individual purpose and those core values for you as a leader. And then I would say, from a basketball perspective, you have to know the game plan. And when we talk to leaders, everybody on your team needs to understand where you're going, how you're going to get there, and their role in making it happen. So, understanding that game plan is really casting a vision and creating a direction for your team as a leader. I believe you have to know your personnel. You have to build that connection. You have to understand your people, their strengths, their weaknesses, their quirks, really get to know them as humans in order to lead them. And we think about people first leadership, and there's often a feeling that it's soft, or it's, and I believe high expectations and high accountability are extremely important in that. People want to be pushed, people want to be challenged when done with kindness and respect. So we talk with leaders, keep raising the bar for your people, but keep it visible, and then clear the path. I believe your job as a leader and as a coach is to, put people in a position to be successful, eliminate the obstacles and the barriers to their success. And you can only do that when you know your people, because it looks different for everyone.
You mentioned that you want that conversation be part of the dinner table, if I heard you correctly. Yes.
Well, you are a part of the dinner table. Once you're a manager, people's going home and they're talking to you about their spouse, their partners, their kids. My boss is doing this, my boss is doing that. So you are a household name once you become a leader and a manager.
I'm just curious because there's always certain rules they say, like keep work at work. You know what I mean? There's certain boundaries.
I would push back a little bit and say the boundaries that we created were very different than most, because I don't believe that you can keep work at work. If you have a bad day
Mm.
at work, you come home. And I would say everyone I know has had a bad day at work and has come home, and it's impacted a conversation or relationship with their spouse or partner or kids. And if something's happening in your day to day life, it is impossible to separate that and not have it impact your work in some way. People that are dealing with loss and grief and divorce or sick kids or whatever the case is, it will have an impact. So, first and foremost, I don't believe as humans we can separate work from work and home from home. We talk a lot at Abundant Empowerment about building full circle leaders, and it's that integrated leadership between who I am at work, who I am at home, who I am in the community, because again, you can't separate those things. As a basketball coach, I had kids live with me over different periods of time. It became a big deal during the state championship run that every Friday night, the entire team spent the night at my house. Now, as a leader and a
Mm.
manager, I would not necessarily advise that you have the entire staff over to spend the
Yeah.
night at your house. But I do believe that building that connection and building those relationships that keep the work at work and keep home at home, I believe is outdated. And understanding that we can't do those things as humans. And there is a boundary, there is a line, and that doesn't mean you tell all of your personal business to every direct report that you have. But I do think that understanding that humanity and the impact that a manager has on their employees, and that what happens at work impacts home, what happens at home impacts work, really allows that dialogue for some transparency and vulnerability to happen, that I think is important in building high performing teams and building trust and in building long term culture and success. When we talk about full circle leadership, again, it starts with each individual. We've got to understand the things that are happening inside of me and inside of us. Too many leaders are focused on that external piece. It's a you problem. I'm managing this. We've got to understand my own reactions and interactions. But then the next circle around that is really people first. And how
Mm.
are we centering and managing our people? But then, we talk about systems orientation. You have to understand that everything is interconnected. What happens at home, at work, at church, at school, all of these things are connected, and each of them has an impact and influences each other in different ways. So we just need to understand that we are human, we are impacted in different ways. A manager has more impact on an individual's mental health than anyone in their life besides their spouse and partner. The role that managers and leaders play, I don't think gets enough attention or enough understanding of that leader or manager, that they have this personal responsibility to do better, to lead better, to be a better manager. Oftentimes somebody gets a promotion, they become a manager, they're getting more money, they're getting a title change, whatever it is, that's what they're really interested in. The leading of people is not something that a lot of folks, there's a stat that I think it's like 80% of people managers don't want to manage people, right? Like
Yeah.
they're so, understanding the importance of who you are as a leader and moving from getting results through myself to getting results through other people. Because once you become a manager, once you become a leader, it's about supporting the people who are doing the work, not necessarily doing the work yourself. And that's a mindset shift that has to happen. So yes, that is a lot of the work that we do. We do executive coaching, team development, leader development across organizations, from the C-suite down to emerging leaders. And that's a lot of what we're talking about. Is there's an understanding of the importance of not only doing the work of myself as a leader, but then understanding how that impacts my people and how that impacts the systems and the teams that they're a part of.
80%'s a big number. Is your book Every Player is Bigger Than the Program? Is it designed to help bring that number down as part of your vision for the book when it releases in September? Or is there some other visions we have for that solution you're bringing to the public?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is awareness, right? I remember I mentioned, my late 20s. I've got 4 direct reports now. I think 3 of them were older than me and 2 of them had kids. And I remember coming home that first day thinking, these individuals' children are now impacted by decisions that I make. And I took that very seriously,
Hmm.
that I have a responsibility to myself, to my people, to their families, to be able to understand, learn, grow, all of these things. And again, that's 20 plus years ago. So I do think there's some level of understanding around the responsibility that comes with that as a people leader and what that means. And we still focus on, promoting high performers who are good at doing the job, who may not be as adept at leading people and getting results through others. So, that's a transition and a mindset shift that has to happen. Part of with the book is really creating simple, free, tools and frameworks that people can use and understand to start to shift that mindset a little bit. All of the things that we talk about in there are not, hiring expensive consultants or changing a lot of things. It's small things that you can do to have an immediate impact on building that relationship. And it's broken down into those kind of 6 aspects, 5 of which I mentioned: purpose, direction, connection, excellence, and enablement. And then the last is legacy. I think it's
Hmm.
important for leaders to understand that you are leaving a legacy every single day. how intentional are you in the type of legacy that you want to leave? And that starts with day one, people managers. It's really about those things that exist beyond us. So, how are we intentionally designing the legacy that you're leaving as a leader? So, again, it's really the goal is to share a story, but
Mm.
also to be able to provide a framework where leaders can see themselves in it and make small incremental changes towards building high performing teams.
Can we peel the onion around some of those six components to drive a new manager, new leader that may hear some of these components, Nick, and be able to buy back years of mistakes and avoid problems that can kill rapport with their team?
So we talked about the first one is purpose.
Purpose.
Understanding it's not necessarily, we've got understanding your why. We think about this in, Simon Sinek's TED talk. It's around that organizationally, but putting that spotlight internally, understanding my purpose, my why as a leader, who am I, who do I want to be, my core values, what are those non-negotiables for me? But really being able to understand and identify my why and my core values. So everything we do, everything we talk about with leaders starts with me and then starts to go out. So again, direction is the second one. It's know the game
Mm,
plan. Every single person on your team needs to understand where you're going, how you're going to get there, and their role in making it happen, which is really important because oftentimes that's the piece that leaders often miss out on. I've got this vision, this is the strategy, this is the direction, but there's often ambiguity or a lack of understanding of every single individual's role. When you think about team sports, you think about basketball specifically, you have to understand how the pieces fit, and everyone needs to know what their job is on any given play. And that's the exact same thing day to day in your organization. Understanding that piece around roles, responsibilities is often an overlooked part of building that direction and creating that vision. Connection is really know your personnel. Say start with an index card and write down every single person on your team, write down the name of their spouse or partner, write down the name of their kids, write down the name of their pet, and see how you do. That's the
mm,
minimum level of knowledge and understanding. If you can't answer all of those questions, then think about the connection that you're having and think about how well you know your people as far as, again, their strengths, their weaknesses. I always tell this story. We had a point guard who is a great point guard. We had a center who is 7 foot. And if the point guard passed the ball to the center 30 feet away from the basket and the center dribbled the ball off his foot out of bounds and turned the ball over, that's not the center's fault. That's the point
mm,
guard's fault for passing him the ball in a position where he wasn't going to be successful. Knowing your people is also putting them in a position to be successful, understanding those strengths, those weaknesses, how they respond to feedback. Certain players, certain people like more direct feedback, indirect feedback. I could yell at one kid. I needed to put my arm around another kid. That's the
mm,
same way with adults on our teams. Your job as a leader is to, you can't speak the same way to everyone. You can't communicate the same way to everyone. You need to understand the nuance of being able to communicate that direction with everyone on your team. High expectations, high accountability is the excellence side. It's really around being clear on the type of culture you want and what you will and will not tolerate. I would say if you see something and don't say something, then you're casting a vote for the type of organization, the type of team, or the type of culture that you want. In our case, if I'm in the locker room after the game and somebody leaves a piece of trash in there and another kid walks by, whether it's theirs or not, and they don't pick it up, then we've just said that's the type of culture that we want to have. We're going to leave that sitting there on the ground.
mm,
So, organizationally, it's the same thing for leaders. We have to understand the type of team, the type of culture that we want. And if we are doing things, and peer to peer accountability is more important than anything. And if we see someone doing something that's counter to what we've stated we want to be or who we want to be, then we've got to be able to address that and communicate
mm,
that and clear the path is really around enablement. Like I said, your job as a leader is to remove the obstacles and barriers for your team's success. That looks different for everyone at every point in time. We talked about, you know, the things that people deal with. You might be dealing with something at home, you might be dealing with something at work. I've got to understand that as a leader and help
mm.
navigate through your success individually on a project, on something that we're going, because we're focused on that legacy. And that's the last aspect of the playbook, is understanding that, again, every leader every day is leaving a legacy. And we've got to understand what we want that to be, what we want that to look like. And when we've defined it and we can reverse engineer that, this is my vision, this is my goal of what I want as a leader, then I can show up and cast a vote for that every single day in the way I lead, the way I interact with my teams, the way I support my people, the way I put them in positions to be successful, the way I want them to stretch. But also, if that means leave and go to another organization and become a leader, then that's great, and be able to
Hmm.
continue to support them in that way.
When you were going through the thick of building that team, talk to me about some key ways that you would try to create the definition of purpose for that scenario. Because I feel like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the definition of purpose for like somebody who owns a gym, somebody who runs a basketball team, and somebody who just leads a small retail store might be a little different. I'm curious about how you defined purpose, because I think that was an anchor in achieving that result of creating that winning team.
I think for me, my purpose as a leader is the same, whether I'm coaching a basketball team, whether I'm the CEO of a nonprofit, whether I'm, an entrepreneur leading my business. My purpose has remained constant throughout all of that. So, in some ways, again, that's where we talk about driving that purpose for individual leaders. Because, yes, the basketball team had a different purpose, that retail store has a different purpose. But everywhere that I show up as a leader for the last 20, 25 years, my purpose remains the same. One of the things that we do a lot of work with teams on is understanding individual purpose, individual core values, and then figuring out how to connect that to organizational core values. Right. It's
Hmm.
one thing for an organization to say, these are our core values as a business. But if I can see how my values translate and relate to those, then I'm a better employee. I'm more connected to the mission. I'm more connected to the organization. So again, I think a lot of that, there is a purpose as a team, but it's understanding that individual purpose. And so that is really important. I think the other thing that you kind of allude to, Paul, around purpose, around basketball and organizations and managers, our purpose was not to win games.
Really?
Win games is a byproduct
Hmm.
of the type of culture, the type of team, the type of relationships that we have. So as a manager, if your purpose is, Q1 results, if your purpose is revenue, then I believe you're chasing the wrong thing, right? We
Hmm.
lost early on, especially, a lot more games than we won. The purpose didn't change, the goals didn't change, the strategy didn't change. You build, you build, you build. So our purpose was around building kids, building leaders. Our purpose was around something bigger than ourselves. Our purpose was around how do we think about the culture, the team, showing up for one another. How do we think about long-term success? Which for me was graduating high school, going on to something post-secondary, whether it's college, a career, whatever that is, being a responsible adult, being a good husband, a good father, a good whatever, path is for that kid. That's the goal. I'm talking to 16, 17-year olds about what life is going to be like them at 28, 30, because that's
Hmm.
the purpose. So if I'm a manager and I'm only thinking about short-term results, then I'm missing out on what that bigger purpose is. And we, with this short termism of so many businesses, we miss out on what's possible. So I do think, again, for me as a leader, that purpose has remained the same for any organization that I've been with, and
Hmm.
understanding that the purpose for my people, the purpose for that team has to be bigger than winning a game or quarterly income results.
But I've seen people struggle with purpose. Do you feel it's a skill or just something you're born with?
I believe all of it is an intentionality
Interesting.
around taking the time to think about, I would say with each of those areas, if you ask me the same question, I would probably have the same answer. which is intentionality. What are the things that are important to me? It's taking the time to sit down and think and process and do this work and journal and whatever it is that resonates with me. And if you can't say, this is my purpose, these are my values, this is who I am beyond, the work or any of these other things, then you've missed out on this opportunity to understand how you're going to show up and understand why you show up. So I do
Mm.
think there's that level of intentionality that is missing from a lot of this work, where we kind of sleepwalk through the day or sleepwalk through our lives in some
Yeah.
cases. So the purpose piece isn't something that I think you're born with. It's an intentionality around defining that, because if my job changes, if we shut down the work at Abundant Empowerment and I go do some other work, my purpose as a human for me that I created intentionally is going to be the same.
I'll give you a frame to work with, and I'll use something from my personal life to put on the table, and I invite you to pick it apart. And I don't really have, I haven't. Everybody has an ego, but I feel like as a result of doing this type of work, it's gotten tougher. I remember I had a 360 evaluation done on me, and I was ranked overall 4.6 out of 5, which I felt was pretty good. And it was to be up for a promotion. And the manager at the time said, "Yeah, that's pretty good, but I like you right where you are." And you'd mentioned earlier that many people managers, because they were good at their job, not because they were trained to lead people. What's the big mistake as to why new managers making that transition? And maybe that manager was right. Maybe he was right not to do that to me. But I'll be honest with you, I was pretty mad. That I would say that scene in my life was an anchor for me finishing my MBA next month, because it made me so mad because I felt like he was wrong.
Yeah.
And I'm just being real with you. Like, just right. I'm curious, what are your thoughts? And I don't think this person had bad intentions. I want to be clear, but it made me mad that I heard that.
I like you right where you are. Would have said, Paul, I think you're doing a great job. I like you right where you are. I believe doing this 360 can help you build for your future. I don't think this promotion is the right one for you, but let's do this in order to support your long term growth. You go into that 360 with a very different mindset of what the end result's going to be. So, again, some of it's just a framing and understanding expectations and level setting. Because I suspect that if he would have said, Paul, you're doing great, I love you in this position, there's a position open, you're not the right fit for it right now, you have a very
Right.
different perspective. So I think
Right.
that's the miss that leaders often have. You'll get tired of saying something before your people get tired of hearing it. But the job of a leader is to lead. And I think that's
Mm.
where some of these things get confused or overlooked for a lot of organizations, a lot of managers, a lot of leaders, is I'm too busy to lead people. I'm too busy to sit down and have this conversation with Paul because I've got all these other things to do. I believe that the most important thing a leader can do is to lead people. And so that framing is just a little bit different in how we're communicating what we're doing, communicating why we're doing something.
Mm.
With a lot of leaders don't believe they have to communicate because I said so is often the thing, and that doesn't work as a parent and it doesn't work as a leader.
I haven't seen. I have 2 kids. I have yet to do. Like, kind of works with my son. My daughter. We have a meeting with her teacher in like a few weeks, and we always worry about. I don't know if I'm assuming you struggled with this too, where it's like, oh, what's wrong with my kid type feeling. So, where can people find more about you and be on the wait list for People First Playbook for building high performing teams?
Peoplefirstplaybook.com is the book site. On that website, there is a People First leadership assessment that you can take that provides a score on each of those 6 pillars of the People First Playbook. You'll get a
Mm.
report out on your leadership zone. as it relates to people first leadership, and then opportunities to connect on the book, stay involved, work with People First Playbook and People First Leadership coaches or consultants books, or you can just send me an email directly, Nick at abundantempowerment.com. Connect, and I would love to share more about what we're doing.
What is a common denominator mistake you see amongst all the work you do that if you waved a magic wand at it would probably make more? Because you said earlier 80% of people don't want to get into management. We wave that magic wand at this one thing. What do you think that one thing may be at this time where maybe more people would want to get in and be successful at it?
I think there's a recognition of the humanity side. We talk a lot about leadership in the age of AI, and what that means and what that looks like. I believe it's more human than ever. It is
Okay.
greater empathy. It's greater vulnerability. It's kindness. Dare I say it's love. These are things that we are missing and it's not something that should be taboo in my opinion. It's
Right.
the old school leave work at work, leave home at home. Like it never worked in the first place because it's impossible. So being able to recognize and understand the humanity of leadership, the humanity of the work that we're doing, I believe is a critical first step, because the more and more that we integrate AI, the more and more we integrate different levels of technology, the more human that leadership needs to be and needs to become. And I think that makes a huge difference. And I think it's, again, people managers, there are people that don't want to get into leadership, and there are people who are in leadership that don't want to lead people. They're there for the promotion, they're there for the title, they're there for the additional money, whatever the case is. Also understanding what it means to be a manager, what it means to be a leader, the responsibility that comes with that. Because I would say when you think about basketball, you put the name on the front of the jersey, and most coaches would say, no player is bigger than the program, right? You've got Duke on the front of the jersey. I would say
Right.
every player is bigger than the program. Every employee is bigger than the brand, because the brand doesn't breathe. Like I see, when you invest in your people and you believe in your people and you support your people, the people will take you farther than the name on the front of the jersey, the brand on the front of the door of the organization ever could, because it's about the people that are doing the work. It's about the people that are growing and breathing and adding life and energy to the culture and to your organization. And I believe that recognizing that and acknowledging that shared humanity would go a long way in creating better people, creating better teams, and creating better organizations for people to show up and work.
I like that the brand doesn't breathe. I haven't heard it that way before. It was a good one.
I think that starting with the connection with your people, but also then understanding that connection with yourself. I say the only way to change the world is one person at a time, and that starts with you. So if you're not doing that work of understanding my why, my core values, the things that make me tick, understanding why did I respond this way when Susie showed up late to work? If we're not evaluating and understanding what I'm doing, what I'm saying, what I'm feeling, the emotions that I'm going through, all of that is critical to you being able to show up and be a leader. So I think that purpose piece, that understanding yourself, starting with that, and then focusing on connection. How am I connecting with folks? Trust is the foundation of high performing teams, and that happens through relationships. So to me, those are two of the most important things, starting with myself and then understanding those relationships, building that connection, building that trust. And that creates, it's vulnerability, it's psychological safety, it's trust building. Those things are critical. If you don't have that on a team, you're not going to be able to really create a strong culture.
What is an activity that you do with teammates that you've seen be effective at bringing morale? I know you said don't let everybody have a sleepover, but is there any fun? Is there any activities that you have found like, oh, we all do this together? This usually helps bridge a lot of gaps and brings connection strong. I'm just curious whether it's bowling or whatever. I hope it's not bowling because I'm not a big bowler, but
There's a universal answer. I do think it comes back. There's a level of intentionality, right? I use that word a lot. It could be any number of things, right? You go to Top Golf, you go bowling. The what is actually a lot less relevant than the why. We're working with an organization with a senior leadership team, somewhat low trust coming in. It's not about what it is that they're doing. It is about creating intentionality, connecting one-on-one, connecting as a team. That could be done in team meetings with a little icebreaker to get to know each other a little bit better on a personal note. So it's not always about high resource things. Not that bowling is extremely resource intensive, but you can start doing those things, building that connection every single day in staff meetings, in one-on-ones. We use cards that are little breaker, get to know you cards. You draw one at the beginning of a meeting, you ask a question, you go around, everyone shares something that happened in my childhood or that I've experienced. It creates a connection in a different way, because you can go bowling and you can go do any of these other things. And if everyone is sitting around on their phone, not engaging in a different way, it's still all surface. I don't think it's as much what, but why and how that we're doing some of these things, and, building that intentionality around connection and driving that is an important first step.